Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, we have Carl Alomar. He's managing partner at M13, your former COO of DigitalOcean, one of my favorite companies. So I suspect you've probably seen a lot. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you. I love hearing that. Any reference to DigitalOcean always brings a little warmth to my heart.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I've been using them for, I don't know, probably since as long as they've been around. Like as soon as they started up, I think I started using it, and I have a couple droplets on there that are just like they've gone through a lot. Ultimately, I feel like. I feel like they're suffering on there, but I haven't had to manage them really. I just kind of like run them. Anyway, so tell me about your career. Tell me about M13 as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a long career, so maybe good to break it up a little bit. But just to give you kind of a quick summary, I came to the US from England where I studied engineering. So I came as an engineering graduate into California. Spent a couple of years kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, working for larger engineering firms. And decided pretty quickly that I needed to kind of control my own destiny, and I just needed to build something of my own. I needed to innovate, and started my first company in California in 1997, which is definitely a long time ago at this point. It was the bubble era, so there's a lot of investment money floating around. I really had no idea what I was doing, but somehow cobbled together a pretty good company. I raised a bunch of money, and ultimately was able to sell it in the year 2000, and then came to New York from there. Did a degree at Columbia, an MBA, 2001, 2003. And then built a fintech firm after that, kind of a global fintech firm, built that up to about 140 million in revenue, and exited that in 2010. And then a couple of years later, met the founders of DigitalOcean and jumped into DigitalOcean as chief operating officer. And from essentially launch of their first product through to IPO, pretty much built out a whole bunch of the different components of the business and helped grow it and build it and got it ready for IPO until I jumped off and started investing in M13.
So let's talk about this a little bit. I mean, so your career it's on paper, and I'm sure there were ups and downs, and you can talk about those as well. But that's stratospheric, right? You went from building and selling your own company to founding a fintech in the era of like early, like you couldn't even build a fintech back when you built it.
There was no such thing as fintech when we built it, but looking back at it now, it was very clearly a fintech business.
And then you blew a hosting service out through IPO. So to what do you attribute all those successes? Is it luck? Is it skill? What happened?
I think to your point, when you summarize a career, you summarize the highlights of the career. There's obviously a lot of ups and downs in the whole thing, and there's no easy sailing the whole way through. I think one of the key things for me was a combination of my resilience through, the bubble bursting, through the financial crisis, through a lot of like tumultuous periods. And I think that I was able to keep my head on my shoulders through tough times and make good decisions. And ultimately that allowed me to find the path on these businesses. But I no one can ever tell you it's smooth sailing the whole way. If anybody does, then I'm being honest. So, but the great thing is from the tough times, you learn a lot. There's a lot of things I've learned that we can talk about, and you evolve and you develop. And I think I'm with every company, and even now at M13, I'm a better leader today than I was at DigitalOcean, and I was better at DigitalOcean than I was at the company before that, and again, better than the company before that. And so at each stage in your life, you're able to take all the learnings and just build a better kind of foundational sense of how to run and build business.
Tell me a story about when it almost all fell, right? When it all failed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the first one. My first company was a tech company. It was a network of video cameras, kind of like what Nest became or what Ring became, but back in the late 90s when we were still kind of like moving off of dial-up modems and we were, trying to trade 4 black and white frames a second over the wires. But we built this network. We started deploying it. It was more of a B2B play, kind of managing your hospitality venue or your gas station or your store or your gym or whatever it was. And we I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 24 years old when I founded it. But we were able to raise a bunch of VC money. It was a hot market and everybody wanted to get in on kind of technology companies. So 2000 came and we were raising our latest round, about $20 million round of funding at that point. And again, back in 2000, a $20 million round of funding was a pretty meaningful round. And I recall the day that we were closing that round, we were going in to sign and wire the money, we had a fire alarm in the office. And so we had about 50 employees at that point. Everyone went out to the parking lot. Everyone was standing in the parking lot. I had my old bricky kind of Razor flip phone. And I got a call. I picked up the phone, got the call. And that was the day the bottom fell out the market. And so the lead investor was calling me and saying their bottom just fell out of their portfolio. They weren't going to be able to close. They didn't know if they were going to ever be able to close. And that we needed to I needed to rethink the round. And obviously, when you're at that stage of funding, it's a sure thing. You have a couple of months of runway left in the bank and you're already gearing up to expand and grow the business. There's a lot of things you're planning to do, and suddenly you get hit with this shock issue. And so right away, I had to somehow settle my head and figure out, okay, what the hell are we going to do? Within, a couple of weeks, we had to let go of half the company to try and cut down burn, extend runway. I had to consider the concept of, hey, do I try and reconstitute the round? We had like 4 or 5 investors in the round, so I could have reconstituted with the others and then tried to find a new lead. But as anybody in the startup world knows, finding the lead is the hardest part of the problem. And luckily, I had been approached, because it was such a hot market at the time, by I think 3 different potential buyers that wanted to acquire the company. But it was pennies on the dollar of what it would have been if we had actually continued to build and grow and take on investment. But at the end of the day, I think the way we landed was we reconstituted the team, like cut it in half, cut a lot of expenses, and then basically started engaging with these potential acquirers. And within 2 months, we were able to actually get an exit and get the company acquired. I stayed with the company for another year under the new ownership, but luckily we got into a position where we were able to squeeze out, everyone got returns on their income, on their capital. I made a little bit of money out of it, and we were kind of all in pretty good shape. But that 2 months between suddenly realizing that, the world was imploding, and that we needed to totally from the ground up rebuild a strategy of how this business was going to survive, to the point of actually getting to an exit and actually being able to sell the company, was a pretty tumultuous period. And I think one of the biggest things I learned in that period, we had a lot of people around me. I did not have a deep bench of board. I did not have a deep bench of advisors. I did not have a really,
Well, you were 26 or 20 something at that point, right?
At that point, I think it was 27 when we did the exit. So, and then I left the company when I was 28, but I had no support mechanism. And the biggest thing I learned was I was completely on an island. I literally had to even my partners couldn't think straight and couldn't really help me, my co-founders. So it was kind of really on me to solve the problem. And what I decided at that point is I'm never going to go into battle without an army. Like you have to have the right people around you, and you have to have the support mechanisms in place so that when problems hit, there's someone you can call, there's people that can support you, there's people that can advise you, there's people that can, help calm you down and calm the situation down so that you can make good decisions and logical decisions. So a big learning out of that.
Who are those people? Or is it like in Silicon Valley where it's the yogi, or is it a trusted assistant, a trusted friend?
Yeah, for me, it's not the yogi, but I'm sure for some people it might be. I think it's who you put on your board, who you take investment from, who you put around you as mentors and advisors as you develop, who your confidants are as your peers in the industry. It's just building this support mechanism, this support network. I think back in the late 90s, 2000 timeframe, that wasn't really a thing. People didn't think about that as much. Money was just money, and people didn't think about how much support was I going to get from my VC and stuff like that. I think today the world has changed significantly. Mental illness has become a massive, massive subject matter. Coaching has become a massive tool that lots of CEOs, lots of founders and leaders use. None of that existed back then. But I think the market has become smarter to the idea that if you really want to get the best out of people, you got to surround them with people that are there with good advice and good support for them. So, as I said, for some people, that's a yogi. For some people, that's an executive coach. For some people, that's an incredible board member or incredible investor. For some people, it's just a mentor or a peer in their industry. And I think you have to figure out what suits you and what fits for you and what helps you navigate. At the end of the day, the decision was still on my shoulders and the actions were still on my shoulders. But knowing that you can bounce ideas off people who are smart and then give you honest and realistic feedback on those allows you to build confidence in your ability to make those decisions correctly.
So I wonder if this is a stretch, but I think since we're both old fogies, we remember the 90s. We remember those crash days. I feel like we're coming up on another 2000, right? With AI and all this other stuff, we're basically changing almost everything about the workplace. 80s, 90s, everybody had maybe a computer. You had a couple things. Things were being automated. You had a mainframe in the basement that was doing stuff, and you kind of replaced the guy who was in the filing. But at this point, we're doing an entirely different, or entering an entirely different world where the people that were super plugged in 2 years ago are now about to be made redundant. Do you think there's any parallels to the .com crash coming with the AI boom, especially given, think about our shopping methods. We used to go to the store and pick stuff up. Now it's Amazon, etc., media, all that other good stuff. What happens to the world when AI becomes ubiquitous? When, I don't know, I become an AI and I just send it off to do these interviews for me, and how do we survive? And then what happens when that inevitable like retraction comes?
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. So I think
it's a full short story right there.
Yeah, there's definitely a book behind that. But if we break it apart into different components, maybe we start by thinking about like the investment market and the bubble concept that you described. So I think that we're probably, whereas the bubble burst in 2000, I think we're probably closer to the 96, 97 timeframe. We're in the very, very early stages of this process. I don't think people have really landed on exactly what the ultimate solutions are going to be. So one great example is the whole story behind the web browser and how, the web browser, began with Netscape, and then we had, Microsoft introducing a browser and kind of different browsers coming about. Ultimately, Google came out with a browser. What nobody realized was the power of the browser was not the ability to browse the internet. It was the search capability. And so Google won because they solved search. And I think we're still in the same kind of era with AI. We have ChatGPT. We have all of these other platforms that allow you to navigate and understand what's happening in the world, or trying to get feedback on what's happening in the world, or support with whatever tools you're trying to get support for. But ultimately, what is the killer app? What is the killer solution that's going to own that category? And I don't think we necessarily have solved that yet. And then with that, there's so much that can be built around it. Today, AI is pretty difficult to launch. It's expensive.
Similar to your camera business as well. If we go back to it,
it's a difficult category, expensive category to launch a business into. That happened. What happened after the internet is suddenly cloud companies like DigitalOcean came about, all reducing the barriers to entry for developers to build, for developers to develop. How are you going to make GPUs more affordable? How are you going to make the ability to access and utilize AI? The tooling around AI to help people build and innovate around AI. All of these pieces of the puzzle are still under development. Once those are fully developed, then the application layer will really become powerful, and you really start being able to see the applications and the tooling and the solutions that come out of AI. So I think there's a long form of story left to be written before you get to a place where you say, oh, this is bubbled out. This is too big. One thing that I think we can all confidently say is the winners within AI are going to be the next biggest companies in history, the next Google, the next Tesla, the next whatever it is. And so it's not a bubble when you think about what that prize looks like. It's a bubble when you recognize that there's going to be a lot of losers along the way. And I think the way to think about it is people will get over exuberant around investing. There will be a correction point where people say, okay, we actually need to be a little bit smarter about where we're putting our money, because not everyone's going to succeed. There's been a bunch of failures. That correction will happen. And then over time, the winners will continue to grow, as came through the 2000 era, and become the biggest companies in the world. And so I do think that's happening. I think that you probably got 2 to 3 years to see this category and this technology mature to get to a point where you're actually now beginning to really understand who's winning and who's losing. And then there may be some correction because investment will become smarter in the category.
If you were that 26-year-old today, and your life was essentially like that guy in the office with the stapler, just like filling out TPS reports, and you're about to be engulfed in this wave of agentification, for better or worse. What am I studying? What am I doing? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to save myself?
Yeah. So does AI kill the workforce? Essentially? the question is the same question, in the Industrial Revolution, does automation kill the manufacturer? And everybody evolved from becoming.
But does it kill the pieceworker, right? The idea of somebody who's sitting back in the Ural Mountains, they used to make gears for watches all winter, and it was a whole family job, and then you had a machine that could do it. So.
Yeah, but their kids are now all developers.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, do we replace their developers?
Yeah, and then the kids of the developers are all going to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So
what is that thing?
It's a good question. I don't think we're ready yet to completely predict it. What I would say is there's there's two components. There's kind of a fork in the road, and we're already kind of seeing it. There's the gig worker fork, which is people. There's a whole industry of, I think there's 70 million gig workers in the US today. So there's a whole industry of people that are just figuring out how to live outside of the corporate environment, how they do the odd jobs, how they do this, how they do that, and how they can create and generate revenue either through basically through gig work. Then there's kind of a bifurcation of even that, which is the people who have built early assets and then they're able to essentially play in the markets and make money doing that. And then I think that there is the innovation and the creativity that comes from humans, I think is always going to be relatively unique and relatively special. So there will continue to be innovators. There will continue to be people who want to give the guidance or the instruction to the AI systems to build the next thing that the consumers need or the humanity needs. So I think that you'll just begin to see more evolution of people fitting into different buckets. And over time, that will evolve. Ironically, in an era where we say that AI is killing everybody's jobs, we have the lowest jobless numbers, I think, in a very, very long time in this country. And so it's difficult to kind of correlate the two, except to think that there is an evolution of the workplace that will happen. I don't think it will happen overnight. And then as it happens, as certain types of jobs become automated and more efficient, other opportunities for work or other things will evolve. I will also say, if you look at the entrepreneurial class today compared to 20 years ago or even 50 years ago, just the volume of people that are building net new things is so significant. 50 years ago, it was the IBM, Big Blue. That's where everybody was. Today, most people want to go work for a startup or want to build a startup or want to innovate or want to create or want to be entrepreneurial in themselves. And I think that's probably more of a stemming of where the market is going as the tools to innovate become better with AI.
Okay. So you're not a AI cynic yet.
I'm definitely not an AI cynic. I think at the end of the day, being an AI cynic is probably shooting yourself in the foot, because you got to accept what's happening. You got to accept the future. And I'd rather navigate how the world will thrive in an AI world rather than how the world will be in demise. That's kind of, I always have to think that way, because for me, at least in the world I live, it's all about what's coming next and what's going to feed the world next and what's going to allow people to find balance.
So that's a good point. I mean, as we close, your VC, you see a lot. How do you maintain a sort of a positive attitude towards technology when somebody comes in for the 30th time with Fitbit for dogs? How do you keep sitting there, staying excited?
It's crazy how many Fitbit for dogs there.
And what are you looking for? What's the one thing that you need that needs to be built that hasn't been built yet?
So I mean, I think it's evolution, not revolution. So it's not like I'm looking for that one revolutionary item that's going to totally change the world. I think everything comes as an evolutionary chain. Even the iPhone was an evolutionary product, not a revolutionary product, even though it did kind of totally change the world of smartphones. Having said that, I think, I get endless amounts, we as a firm get endless amounts of inbound requests and stuff. There's a lot of bad ideas out there, and nothing against anyone that's thinking of bad ideas. Keep thinking them, because there's a lot of bad ideas that have led into incredible ideas. So I think the first thing is to look at the founders and to understand, one, if I'm going to invest in this person, is this someone that I can spend the next 5-10 years working with? Is this someone that I want to be around? Furthermore, are they able to, do they have a vision? Are they able to sell the vision? Do they have charisma? Are they able to hire? Are they able to raise money? Are they able to do all of these things? And then ultimately, do they have a really good business sense? And I've seen a lot of people that have built businesses that are average, but because they're great founders, they have evolved those businesses to become great businesses. If you think about the story of Slack, that started as a gaming product that failed, and then ultimately closed down and used the rest of the $5 million they had left in the bank to transition and build this communications tool that became a $28 billion sale. And so it's all because you have a great founder that maybe had a bad idea, but as that idea evolved, they were able to translate that into, okay, what actually makes business sense or what can work. And so I think the first thing is really finding the best founders out there. For me, from a category perspective, I think in, periods of time, I think in the long run, you start thinking about quantum computing, you start thinking about robotics. There's a lot of things in the long run that I think will change the world and kind of from a futuristic standpoint, will change the way people live. But in the shorter term of like what's being developed today, I think for me, the biggest thing right now is any infrastructure or tooling advancements that really allow people to build better, to build more inexpensively, more efficiently. So developer tools, productivity tools, infrastructure solutions that create more efficiency around GPUs. Those are the types of things that kind of help you manage your data more effectively. Like these are the challenges that AI are introducing, and these are the barriers that they're introducing to the next generation of innovators. So how do you build the tooling set that supports the next generation? I think that's what I'm really excited about for 2026. And then alongside that, I still have my kind of blood in my veins around fintech. So I do have a real interest in kind of fintech infrastructure, stablecoin infrastructure, global payments, how the world economy is evolving and working, becoming a single economy around blockchain rather than all these like small pockets of economies. And I think there's a really interesting evolution that's happening there as well.
All right. Well, Carl, this has been fascinating. I think there's I think your first story actually helped clarify a lot of stuff for especially me when it comes to the world of AI. Because I mean, that was a heady time to be living through, and it sucked when it ended. And I'm worried that we might be on the same track.
Yeah, but wherever there's a dark day, there's a sunrise ahead. So just keep your head up.
You sure you're a VC?
I'm a very positive person.
You sure you're a VC? I'm worried about it. I think they mixed up.
Yeah, I'm optimistic but realistic. But I do.
Maybe you're the yogi.
I'm optimistic to believe in what we invest in.
All right. Well, this is great. Where can people see what you're up to? M13, obviously, but are you writing anything or doing a Substack?
Yeah, I post a lot of content and stuff, mainly through LinkedIn is probably the best way to find it. Post it out on X as well. But either through M13 or through LinkedIn, it's best ways to connect and find me. And I'm out there, so I'm happy to talk and happy to share my thoughts as people kind of have questions around them.
All right, we'll send people over there. All right, thank you for this. It's been great.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
I'm John Biggs. This has been Keep Going. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. Remember, Keep Going is entirely listener supported. If you're listening to this, please head over to keepgoingpod.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast for as little as $5 a month. This is a labor of love, and every little bit helps. Thanks for listening.